As we moved into 2025, one of the things that we talked about is that we want to go through the different stories of the Bible because I think that they're helpful for us. I think for so many of us who've gone through these processes of asking different questions and bigger questions, it's about now refamiliarizing ourselves with our faith and with our tradition because it's much bigger than I think that many of us have given it credit for. Are there things that you should let go of? Are there things that maybe you move away from or evolve from? Absolutely, and that's okay. But there's still so much there that is beautiful and good and helpful. And so I love re-looking at these stories from a different angle. And every time that I do, to be honest, I'm overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed that this is here. That this story, that these stories, this collection of stories of faith and tradition has stood the test of time. I'm sad at times that the way that we told the stories previously, that we've used them or manipulated them or made them small or put them in boxes when I think that they're so big and robust and they've freed so many people. And so I always want to re-look at these stories from a different angle. And so today we're going to do a little bit of work with a different story in a Bible. So I want to do some things for you. First, I'm going to tell you a story. And after I tell you that story, then I want to tell you an idea about ideas. And then what I want to do is I want to tell you about an idea that changed the world. And if we can talk about an idea that changed the world, then I want to talk about the dance partner to the idea that changed the world that also changed the world. We're going to get a little meta here. And then if we can do that, then we can connect the dots to you. He's at the end of his life, and it's one of those moments where you're just reflecting on everything that you've gone through. It's those moments where you're having perspective on who you've been and who you are and all of your narratives and what you're about. It's at the end of your life where quite literally you know that you're probably going to die. And for him, he looked back at all the stories and he thought about when he was younger, when he was arrogant, and when he was confident. When he would tell his family stories about his dreams, and in his dreams one day they would all bow down to him. And he left. Man, who was I in that moment? What kind of person was I that I would have had the audacity to tell my family these things? And if you've ever done something in life and you're so wonder how people have responded to you, and then 5, 10, however many years later you look at yourself and you can just say, God, I was immature. I thought that I knew everything, but really I was just a sophomore in high school and I had read 2 books. I thought that I knew everything about faith, but to be honest, I listened to 1.5 Rob Bell podcasts, and now I was ready to take on my entire conservative family at a Thanksgiving dinner and answer all of their theological questions. I'm not saying anybody here's done that, I'm just saying we know people. And so he had enough humility to laugh at himself. He remembered the pain. He remembered when he felt betrayed by them, the false accusations. What a wild narrative in Scripture that his own brothers would come to him wanting to kill him. But he remembered the grace that they didn't. Somehow that could be grace now, even though that they left him quite literally in a cistern. That's a Bible word for you. Big old jar. And eventually he was picked up by some people and taken to Egypt. He remembers the story of finally getting there, and that there's parts of him that he was always just good at leading, and he was good at managing things, and he gets into this guy's house named Potiphar, and he took really good care of that home, and he remembers being there, and Potiphar's wife, man, she was a babe, but he knew better. He knew, man, I better not do this, even though she's making all the moves on me, because if I do this, it's going to challenge my own integrity, my own ethics, and the morality that I ascribe to, and those things are actually beneficial to me. He remembers the moment that he didn't do it, and he remembers the moment that he was still punished for doing what was right. Have you been there? He remembers the moment that he was taken to prison, and everything just felt unjust about the systems of this world, unjust about what he was going through. And there in prison, he still found ways to succeed. He remembered when they came to him, a baker and a cupbearer, again, a biblical story, and they had dreams. And they told him dreams about what they were going through, and he told them the meaning of those dreams, and they said, man, you have wisdom and you have a gift, and if we ever get out of here, then we are going to tell Pharaoh, and he will get you out of here as well. Has anyone ever made promises to you? Promises that seemed so incredible, seemed so true. Maybe they were promises about your job or promises about a relationship. Maybe they were even promises that were made in vows. Has anyone ever broken those promises to you? Not fulfilled the obligation of what they told you that they were going to do. And that you sit, waiting, hopeless, uncertain. Is this going to work out? Am I really going to be here forever? Maybe the metaphor is your story, not just literal, that you feel like you're in chains, that you're imprisoned, that there's a box that is keeping you closed off, and you know that there's so much more to your life. And then as you have perspective, he remembers, but then there was a moment that this Pharaoh had a dream, and this cupbearer and this baker, they couldn't answer the dream for this Pharaoh, but they said, we remember a guy. And they finally told this Pharaoh about who this man was, and he came and he interpreted the dreams. And it was there in that moment that he realized in his old age that the whole time I had been preparing, that all of those years I wanted the success, I wanted the thing that I wanted then, but I was actually never ready for it. That all of the things before that were actually setting me up for the moment. I always thought that they were going to call me into the game, but it was actually a gift that they never did before. It was actually a gift that I didn't get what I wanted until this moment. And there he remembered that he had that chance, that moment that he's always been waiting for, in front of that Pharaoh, in front of that suit, in front of that person who was going to give him that job. Finally had a moment in front of that person that he loved, whatever the thing may be for you. And in that moment, he made a shot and he told Pharaoh the dream. I know exactly what that means because I've been training for this day. That you trust that the gift that God's given you, that it really is that, a gift that God has given you, that there's something unique about your life and who you are and the way that you operate and the way that you navigate the world. And that it's so unique to who you are that that thing's going to change the world one day. And it did. He became the second in command of the greatest empire, of the greatest Fortune 500 company that the world had ever seen in that day. And there, because he was the second in command, he had an opportunity not just to help himself, because here's where maturity came in the second half of his life that he would have never done in the first half of his life. This success wasn't for him. This success was for everybody else. And he knew that now in a way that he would have never known that before. And so he came up with a plan and he came up with a strategy because of everything that he had gone through, the betrayal, the broken promises, his own immaturity, people fabricating lies about him. All of that led to this moment. And then it finally led to a moment where he got to meet his family again. And because he had gone through healing, because he had gone through transformation, because he had participated in maturity in a different way, in that moment he didn't want to hurt them because he had found all the good stuff in life. Have you ever been there where you've just dreamed about taking care of your enemies? That you're going to treat them in the same way that they treated you. If you get an opportunity, you're going to give them the opportunities that they afforded you, but not him. He saw his family, and he had kindness in his heart, and he had compassion, and he had perspective, and perspective was a gift. And there Joseph was at the end of his life. His father had died. His family had left Israel and they had come down to Egypt. And because they had left Israel and come down to Egypt, because of everything that he had gone through, not only would he save an entire country, but he would save his entire family. And that perspective is what he had at the end of his life. Listen to some of his final words in Genesis chapter 50. Yes, that is a beer opener. That is my marker. It's on brand. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." And when their message came to him, Joseph wept. And his brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. I want to tell you an idea about ideas. There's a book that came out many years ago called Sapiens by an Israeli anthropologist named Yuval Nahari. And in this book, Yuval Nahari describes these things that make Homo sapiens very unique compared to other mammals that have ever existed. By the way, fun fact, and they never told me this back in Bible school, did you know that there were 6 other versions of hominids that lived on planet Earth at the same time with Homo sapiens? Hominids would be other creatures like Neanderthals that kind of were like humans but not human beings. Did you know this? No one ever told me that. Didn't fit with the Adam and Eve story very well. Anywho, side note, that one was for free, and you are welcome. The point of the story is that all other mammals are incredibly smart, and different mammals can actually organize themselves in groups of 10, sometimes groups of 50s, and even some chimpanzees can organize themselves in groups of 100s. But only human beings can organize billions of people. And we do that through one incredible idea. We can tell stories. And no other animal, no other mammals have the capacity to tell stories in the ways that we do. And when we tell stories, it brings ideas together. That when we tell stories, it can shape and move people in different ways. And so there have been many stories that we have shared as human beings over the years. There have been many ideas that we have passed along. Some ideas can move millions of people to do incredibly hateful things. Some leaders can tell stories that will move millions of people to murder, to kill, to rob, to take. There are other stories that can tell people to have compassion and empathy, to see yourself in a bigger way. And what I love about the scriptures is that there are tons of stories in there that lead us to the greatest truths of what it means to be human. Truths like this, that there is a creator and you are made in the image of this creator. That if God is a creator, then you are the creator of your life. What a powerful story to hear through any generation. Why a story like that becomes even more powerful, why it was revolutionary, is that the scriptures are the first time in human history when that story was provided for all of humanity. Sometimes when we live in America, sometimes when we live and we're the product of our cultures, we don't realize the power and the revolutionary nature of some stories and when they were told. All of these stories in Genesis, really all of the stories through the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, these are the original stories for the Jews. And here's what you always need to remember about Judaism, is that this was a group of slaves who were literally oppressed by every major superpower that the world had ever seen. And by every, I mean every. Let me go through a few with you. Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, all the way up to, World War II. That those stories lasted. Here's an interesting fact historically and anthropologically. Pick thousands of other religions and thousands of other stories, and none of those lasted. Why? That's just fascinating to me. The uniqueness that we just read on a Sunday morning in February of 2025, a Jewish story from 3,000 plus years ago. That's crazy, by the way. And part of the reason that it's so revolutionary is that it's a group of slaves who were reorienting themselves for who God can be and what it meant to be human. Because in the ancient world, they did a lot of what we do today. Powerful people would tell stories that made powerful people more powerful. That's what they would do. Propaganda has always been here. So in the ancient world, 99.999999999 more 9% of stories that were about religion and God was all about these gods setting up the kings, emperors, and Caesars and whoever. Where these gods would say, they're in power for a reason, and the rest of you should serve them because I have set them up. I know we have no modern stories like that. I'm just telling you that these are ancient stories. The unique thing in this ancient story is that all of these stories refute that idea. And so they're constantly stories of a group of people being in slavery and being oppressed and God giving them a different version of reality. The creation story is wildly different. It's the first time in any creation story that we've ever seen where people are not slaves made to be there for the benefit of the kings and the gods, but rather that human beings were made in the image of the divine, that they are co-creators in this world. Never lose sight of that. Never lose sight of how powerful the tradition is that we come from. For all of the people who have misused the stories of the Bible to gain more power, the Bible starts and originates with stories that say, no, every human being is a gift and a slave to no one. So the idea that comes out of the Joseph story that's so unique, that changes the world, is a fancy theological world of divine providence. Bet you weren't looking for that one at New Abbey on a Sunday morning. Divine providence does this, though. If you're a group of slaves living in the ancient world, here is how you understood time. Time is a big circle. And because it's a big circle, it just constantly repeats itself again and again and again and again. And religion of the day would reinforce that by just saying, look at the seasons. Nothing is changing. And so if you were born into slavery, if you were born into servanthood, then you must stay there forever. This story is the first time in human history, this is not a joke, where we see divine providence come in a unique way. These early stories in the Genesis stories. And divine providence is simply this. It's this idea that there's a purpose and there's a plot and there's a reason for what's happening in the world, and what if God is working in the background? Now, for my theological and philosophical people in the world, yes, you're going to ask great questions about what about the problem of suffering and what about evil, and people have thought about that for all time, and those are great questions which I'm not going to address today, but ChatGPT will happily do that for you if you want to address that after the service. I'm dead serious. I actually asked ChatGPT just out of curiosity. Gave great answers. Rather, what this story about is the story is trying to break that cycle in the ancient world. It's trying to say, what if it's not the same circle? What if you're not stuck? What if you don't have to be a slave because that's what you were born into? What if everyone else's narrative that is limiting who you can be is not true? What if there is a God who has a plot and a purpose and is interested in moving in your real life? What if there is a God who sees beyond pharaohs and systems, who sees beyond the current narratives that you cannot see beyond, and God could even use this for greater things? What if that could be true? Wouldn't you need that in every generation of humanity? That these words are eternal, not because they get us to heaven one day. These words are eternal because they're true in every generation. There will always be a group of people or individuals in any society, in any family, in any whatever thing it may be, and they will need a story like this. What if you don't have to stay stuck there? I need that. That idea of divine providence, that God is moving, is here, is with, is for, is ahead in our lives, is something that is revolutionary. It's a story that when the Bible is at its best, and the church and religion have not always made Bible at its best, it frees people. It lets them know, I know there are even people who are people of faith who've given you a story and they are trying to oppress you, hold you down, or use the story to abuse you. But when you get a hold of the story on your own and you allow these words to speak to you, when you allow them to get in your bones and in your soul and in your DNA and to affect you at a cellular level, you say to yourself, that is not what these words say. This is the story of a God who is moving and is shaping and is freeing and who's empowering and is who reminded me that I am a co-creator in this narrative of what it means to be human. And then even more than that, when these things get in you, when these things begin to shape you, you realize I'm not just creating for me. I'm creating for everyone else around me, that I am healing, that I am maturing, not just for me. I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for all of those kids that were just in here so that they have different stories about God to share in the world, so that they see themselves in a different world. I was at dinner the other night with somebody, and they were telling a story of a friend who had just come out. This friend doesn't go to New Abbey, and they were just weeping because their friend had to go back home over the holidays. And when this friend went back home over the holidays, their family really hadn't talked to him for a year after coming out. And the family gave them the line, which so many of you in this room have had to go through. We do love you. We really do love you. We just don't think that you're living into God's purpose. And that rejection from family, the rejection from the people that this person loved the most, right, was breaking them. And I think about stories like that. And I think about that pain, and we need the narratives of Scripture to free us from that. To say, man, there's a bigger narrative out there for you. And nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to limit who you are in that way. Nobody gets to rob you of your divine image. Nobody gets to rob you of the fact and reality that you are a co-creator with God. Nobody gets to make you a slave. And it also frees you, and as you grow, you realize, and I'm not going to give anybody that power. That's a powerful lesson for us today. I understand that you can turn on social media at any point, and there's a lot of overwhelming news stories. You don't have to give it any power. You don't have to let that shape who you are. You don't even have to fight off that thing on a comment section of a social media post. You don't. You can. Good luck. Talk to your therapist. It's not helpful for you, I promise. Instead, you can have a different and powerful narrative of who you are and who God has made you to be. So an idea that changed the world was divine providence, and it was an idea that was introduced into the scriptures through these original Genesis stories. And it was for a bunch of slaves, because the Jews, the Hebrews, the Israelites throughout the scriptures, they have stories where they continue to be oppressed by different ancient superpowers. And they never lost their religion, which, by the way, the only group in all of history that this is the case. Here's the story for 99.999% of everyone else. Superpower comes in. They kill you, they take all your land, they move you somewhere else, and guess whose religion you now have? Theirs. Because the system that you were given was simple. Their God's clearly more powerful than my God. So it must be real. I guess their Caesar really is the best Caesar. But the ancient Israelite story that we hold on to, and I always remind people of this, Jesus was Jewish, by the way. The Jewish narratives that Jesus would have lived into is, no. There's a different kingdom. A different reality. Caesars will come and go, but they will never have the right to rob you of your humanity, of your purpose, of the plot that God has for you, of everything that you're capable of being. That's wildly powerful. Here's the dance partner of the idea that changed the world, that also changed the world. And this one's unique. It's forgiveness. This is baked into all of our stories and our tradition. It's a huge story of process and healing and transformation and maturity. That when you don't put forgiveness as a dance partner with divine providence, then what happens is this. You eventually get success, or you get the thing that you want, but you became the Pharaoh that you never wanted to be. Scriptures talk about this all the time. I know that we would never do this in American politics. I know that we would never win an election and treat our enemies in the ways that we thought that they treated us. I've never seen either party do that. And I've never seen it create more harm. Never. I'm just saying, thank God that doesn't happen in our world, because that would be traumatic. That when we live in a world where retribution is met with retribution, when hurt is met with hurt, when power is met with power, it doesn't work. All of the people that you care about most, the people that have changed the world, the MLK Juniors, the Rosa Parks, the Gandhis, they did not meet power with power in that way. They knew better. Go read the stories of apartheid and Desmond Tutu, right? Go read all of these stories, and it is about, they literally called it healing and reconciliation trials. Because if you just want a trial where I'm going to give you what you gave to me, it's just not going to work out for you. It's just not. Because at the end of the day, here's what human beings do. When you hurt me and I hurt you, the last stop on this train always is I will kill you. I will no longer believe that you are made in the image of God, and I will start by hating you. And after I hate you long enough, I will kill you with my words, I will take you of your rights, and I will eventually, literally kill you. That's true. My favorite quote from Gandhi is this: everyone knows that Jesus is a pacifist, but Christians. Fascinating. But all of those stories are baked in. It's my favorite story of the resurrection that I've shared here again and again. Why forgiveness is so important in that story is that Jesus realizes this, that if you do not transform your pain, you will transmit it. So when Jesus comes out of the tomb and Jesus is resurrected, Jesus shows them his scars and his wounds. And I've said this a million times, but I'll say it again. When Jesus comes out, guess what? Caesar is still Caesar, and Pontius Pilate is still Pontius Pilate. All of the people who hurt and betrayed and killed Jesus are still there. Nothing in the world has changed. The colors are the same. The birds are the same. Everything is the same but Jesus. And Jesus is showing you, and this is the way that I want you to live now. They tried killing me, robbing me, taking it all from me, but they didn't get that. Instead, I'm going to live a different life, and I'm going to forgive them, and I'm going to reconcile, I'm going to heal. Caveat and asterisk, because I know there's a lot of good liberals in this room. I am not asking you to put yourself in situations where you continue to get hurt. You can also have boundaries. You can also take care of yourself. And you don't have to have all of those conversations right away. Give it time. And you may never be required to have any of those conversations. But this story is inviting you into this type of forgiveness. Forgive, maybe even in the most selfish way, for you, so that you will heal. Because you don't have to hurt them, and you don't have to hate them. That's way too much power for them to have. Also forgiveness for yourself. You don't have to hurt yourself. You don't have to hate yourself. You can be forgiven even of that. That you can trust that God is working in your life, that God has a purpose, a plot, a plan. And in the middle of that, you can offer some grace to yourself, that this thing is about progress and not perfection. And as you have moved along the way, I know everything has not been perfect, but what if God is okay with you? I want to look around a room like this, and I know so many of your stories. Man, what if you could forgive them? What if they're just not there yet? Maybe they'll never be there. But maybe when you do forgive them or yourself, you're going to find freedom in ways that you've never found it before. You're going to see parts of this purpose, this plot, this plan with fresh eyes. And one day you're going to look back and you're going to say, man, I never wished that upon anybody. But I know why I went through it. I know the story that I have to tell now. And each of you, every single week, you share in good news and you share in conversation time those things that you have gone through. And you give hope to somebody else sitting here. You share a little piece of your journey, not because you've always made it to the other side. Sometimes you're still in the midst of it, and sometimes you're just going through with it. But we share those things to remind ourselves of what's true. So I want to connect the dots back to us after these ideas that have changed the world of divine providence, a God who is behind the scenes with a purpose, a plot, a purpose for who you are, and this dance partner of forgiveness, that they have to go together. And connecting the dots to you is this. I don't know where you're at in February 2025. Maybe you feel stuck. Maybe you're figuring it out. Maybe everything is not as you planned it or would have engineered it. This is a story about that. Hold on to that story. Maybe you're not as far along as you think you ought to be or should be. And as a good grandma once told me, stop shitting on you and others. Maybe you're just not there yet, and that's okay. What if where you are is good? What if you can't even see down the road of where you might be going? What if even this, so much of what you're doing isn't even for you? I have all kinds of dreams about my life all the time, things that I want to be and want to accomplish. And then there's the reality of no one knows how much time they got left sort of thing. But I live into this. Man, whatever I'm doing, I just hope my kids have a different life than I had. For all the abuse that I went through as a kid, for all the trauma that I went through in my family, I know this, my kids don't have to get on that carousel. And if that's what I give through my narrative, then I've already done my job. And each of you have some carousels that you can get off, insanity that you don't have to participate in, narratives that you can change. But at the end of the day, this story brings you this freedom. You get to choose that. No system, no pharaoh, no chains, no whatever the thing may be has to keep you where you're at. You can co-create with God, and God can be with you in that. And then you can forgive yourself, and you can forgive others. And there will be a day that narrative will not only change your world, but will change the world of everyone else around you as well. Would you get in those groups of 3 or 4? Would you answer this question with one another? How can one of these ideas, being the ideas of divine providence or forgiveness, shift your life? Enjoy.